working on a bank holiday. Now I see why you cry. You've been watching your best days slipping by as you go.
Welcome to podcast number 5. We've hit number 5, and I'm with the founder of the Million to One charity, which in a nutshell is looking to get 1 million people to pay just £1 to raise £1 million for creating a home for life for disabled children in Southern Africa. Where did the concept start for you?
The way it all started was I volunteered out in Southern Africa in various different areas for quite a long time, not loads and not any more than anyone else, I don't think. When I was back out there in 2004, there was a group of women who approached me and said that there was a group of disabled children who were homeless, that no one was able to help. They're living in a hospital, so they're not on the streets, but it's not really a way of life. They don't really have much. They're existing, basically. I think that's the best way to put it. They're existing rather than having a proper life. So they asked if I could help because it's very hard to raise the kind of funds that you need from within the country. So I was only 24 at the time. I didn't know how I could do it, but I went back in 2008 because I decided that I couldn't live with the decision not to do something about it. So I went back over and did lots of research on prices and how much everything would cost, the home, the medical care, rehabilitation, everything for each year for 8 kids. And then I spoke to a couple of charities that I knew very well, local charities, and said, would they be willing to expand and adopt the kids and run the home if I funded it from the UK? And a couple of charities that I knew said, yes, they would, but they needed two conditions. They had 2 conditions. One was that obviously the money comes in every year, but the second was the one that was going to be really hard to meet, which was that they had a guaranteed income for their lifetime. I had to offer a guarantee before this ever began that I would have exactly the same amount of money coming in 70 years' time, because this is going to be a home for life. So I came back to the UK and did lots of kind of thinking and tried to work on lots of ideas. And I Googled how much interest a million would make and realised that the interest alone off a particularly large lump sum would be enough every year to cover the home, which is about between 30 and 40,000 approximately every year.
I'm really intrigued by the concept of the single pound because I remember when I came to one of your talks originally, I was almost a little bit embarrassed about just paying £1 and getting this great talk back.
If I was to ask absolutely anyone, tell them about the idea and say it's £1 once, I don't think anyone would ever say no. I think what you have to address then is the marketing and how you get out to that many people and how you show them that it is completely different from something else and how you build up that trust. I think that's the really big challenge. There is a way for people to pay more. Lots of people have paid, though I don't think there was. In fact, I know that there wasn't. When you joined up, it was a whole different process, and I've got a new web developer since then, and we've set up the payment system differently. And kind of the average, I reckon, is about 5, if I really looked at it overall, about £5.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people have come up to me since and said, oh, I really want to pay more. So there will be a donate button on the site if people want to pay more. But the idea is I'm actually trying to move away from the word donate because I want it to be almost, the whole thing is charitable, and I'm giving away 100% of the profit, but it's people doing something for themselves, people investing in themselves, if you like, people paying £1 to buy membership for My Million to One and using My Million to One, the free events, offers, everything, to do something for themselves rather than being asked to donate to another cause across the world that they don't really know anything about with kids that they don't know. I think just people have the right to treat themselves as much as they have the right to give, if that makes any sense.
Some other charities within the sector, and they take the corporate sponsorship route, maybe try and get a lump sum and a key sponsor. Is that an area that you've explored?
I'm open to lots of ideas, to be honest, because I think with something this ambitious that I'm doing completely on my own, it would be quite silly to limit myself and not pursue as many avenues as possible. Because again, my priority is the kids. It's getting them a home and making the money to get a home. I just want to do it by helping people throughout the UK as well. I want it to be simultaneous. I don't want people to be giving. I want people to be doing something for themselves. But my priority is obviously that these kids really need a home.
One of the other areas I was particularly impressed with, it was just the, I'd almost call it ballsy ambition that raising £1 million in 1 year, that you've set yourself a fixed finite target, which I found hugely impressive, and I'm sure, slightly scary for you thinking that those days ticking down? And was that to force yourself to get a deadline so that you could get the home up and running? What gave you the idea of something so finite?
I think if you're looking at a lump sum, a really big lump sum like that, unless you make it finite, it never happens. It will just drag on. People will put it back. The minute you set a date, the minute you say, right, this is it has to be by this point, you're creating more of a story. You're creating more of because it's nice, it's compact, it's a story. There's also the fact that a lot of very high profile people, very busy people, have gotten on board, some of whom I knew before, and some people like Mark Beaumont and Leon Taylor, who I didn't know before and who I've got in touch with and asked if they would help. And the reason people are so quick to give to this project, to give their time, is they know that it has a finite date. It's not going to be ongoing. It's going to be for this year only. And they're only going to be asked once. And that means that they can take out time. They can allocate specific time when they otherwise leave incredibly busy lives. And also they often do a lot of work with charities that they're very loyal to. And I don't want to take away from that. I want them to be able to do something to help people in the UK who want to follow in their footsteps, not become a charity that they have to be a patron for. So by setting a target for a year, I'm encompassing and managing all of those things. And then there is just a very simple fact that the longer time goes on, the longer these kids don't have a home. And there's one child in particular who I feel particularly responsible for, who I've known of for a long time, since I was 18, and she's almost 19 now, and by the time she reaches 21, she won't be allowed in the home. She'll be too old to go into what's a children's home, or will grow to be an adult home, but it will start to be a children's home. And I just don't think I could live with that responsibility. I don't think I could live with the fact that I let it drag out so much that she never got the home that she deserves.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's been one of the themes, and a particular area of interest for me is around self-motivation and dealing with procrastination. And it's been interesting talking to some of the other guests on the podcast, and there seems to be that universal theme that of something that all of us struggle with in one shape or form, but actually putting yourself out there and saying, this is what I'm going to do, and announcing it almost becomes fact, and you have to get on with it because you've promised it to other people, and that in itself becomes motivating.
Yeah, well, a lot of the kind of success books you can read, not necessarily big business success books, but just talking about the principles of success and the thoughts behind it, they all say that unless you really put yourself out there, really commit, and unless you tell everyone that you're going to do it, it's often a lot harder to do. You have to make it as public as possible, because subconsciously you're then under far more pressure, and you then find yourself living up to expectations. And I think that is very useful. And I've even wondered recently if setting myself a year for this was too long, if it would create more urgency and be more of interest to people if I'd made it even shorter. But I really wanted people to be able to use the site for a year, to have all these events over the year, which is why I made it that long. And I would like to stagger everything across it. But I think that sense of urgency is hugely important if you're going to succeed.
Yeah, and I think there is a beautiful symmetry to it. So 1 year, £1 million, hopefully 1 million people is something that you can really hook onto and communicate simply as an idea, because I'm sure it'd be interesting to hear your views on how you find people's attitudes are to charity, because we do get asked to give a lot, and almost it's sometimes difficult to know where to place your money and where to invest your causes, because there are so many great and worthy causes that are out there. And I'm sure one of the challenges for my 1,000,000 to 1 is getting that voice and that awareness out, because this is something I believe you've started from scratch. It's starting with just you, and obviously you've done an amazing job in networking your way around the world and putting together these great connections. But no, it's still quite a challenge, I imagine.
The minute you say charity, people think donations, people think they're being asked. And charities do a phenomenal work. I mean, companies, organisations like UNICEF are constantly on hand to go out to disaster zones, to go out and react to situations. And obviously this is completely different. This is time that I've spent a good couple of years building up to this point. So they do phenomenal work, but this is different. I'm always referring to this as what people can do for themselves. So I've even started marketing it more as bringing your bucket list to life. And people then tend to find out about the charity aspect afterwards. There was a recent workshop that I did on Sunday that went fantastically well. It was a physical theatre workshop with lots of really, really incredibly lovely people. But I don't know how many of them really knew about the charitable aspect of My Million to One until I did a talk beforehand, and then the reaction was huge.
For the Wheels of Wisdom podcast, we have quite a few cyclists and adventurers that listen in, and I did a little bit of homework on you, Alana, and your previous career, because I understand you left behind a very promising career in broadcasting to set up on your own and create a charity from scratch. So I was thinking that you, of all people, must know the importance of creating a good TV format or podcast format. And we were Facebooking a little bit over the last couple of weeks on how we're going to work the cycling angle back into the podcast. Because typically how it works is I normally head off on a cycle ride with my guest to an interesting place of their choosing, and then kind of take on the gods of outside broadcasting and try and get some half decent audio out of it among kind of planes and wind and stray dog. I think with this we've taken a true sort of Alan Partridge approach of kind of taking a sledgehammer to the format. So I think we're both sat inside, and me in London, you up in Manchester over Skype, and so I'm sitting on a chair and instead of a bicycle. But as very interesting to read there in terms of the site, there are a couple of really interesting areas there for cyclists and adventurers. And I understand as part of the discounts and offers that you're creating, there'll be areas there that touch for cyclists as well. It'd be interesting to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I pulled up a few of them actually before we started speaking so that I could refer to them. People have been really generous actually. I think anyone who works in adventure or in travel, they understand My Million to One and how huge it is much faster. I think because they tend to have to think really big themselves. So there's been a really, really positive response. And there's companies like Cycle Active who have given a discount off 6 cycling tours, and one of them is a cycling Cuba. So there's some in the UK and some abroad. There's stuff like that that's really good. There's discounts off actual bikes from places like Foffa Bikes, and I'm still speaking to lots of other people who on board but need to give me exact details that I can put up. Then there's a really, really lovely person called Steve from Chasing Trails who does kind of outdoor mountain biking, but he also teaches tricks and stuff like that. So he's come on board and offered discounts for free skills courses and stuff, discounts and free skills courses. And then, of course, Mark Beaumont's webinar, which is in May, because he's ridiculously busy doing something amazing and incredible with the BBC all up until then.
Yep.
His webinar is anyone can ask him anything to help with their own adventure. And obviously he has an incredibly strong cycling background.
Great. No, I'm really looking forward to hearing Mark Beaumont. So I remember watching the BBC documentary that he did on his trip. Yeah, I hadn't realised that you're also getting into the bike discounts, because I'm afraid I lost a beloved bicycle to Tom Kebble-Davis, the hungry cyclist who was in the first podcast. So I had a little adventure of my own that I had borrowed his bike when he moved out to France, and then I rode it back to him out in Burgundy. But I feel like I've lost a long-lost friend. So I might well be in the market, so maybe I can help in that way.
There's a explorer and filmmaker and broadcaster called Dominic Gill, and he does, I don't know if you've ever heard of Take a Seat. It's kind of a series of different documentaries, but he takes a tandem bike across different parts of the world, and people join him to cycle. Just complete strangers, locals, join him and help him cycle around the world. And he's an amazing character, and he's had some absolutely amazing experiences. And he is also doing a webinar from the States in November talking about that. So that's kind of a different aspect for anyone who would consider cycling for adventure and potentially using a tandem, just kind of something a little bit different. So he'll just be chatting about that.
Oh, that would be superb. Yeah, I've been on the back of Tom's tandem, which is one of the funniest experiences of my life. You just go around with this massive smile on your face because you really stand out, particularly two sort of middle-aged men cycling through the countryside. We made it quite a sight, but it was so much fun. Imagine for strangers as well, the idea of getting on the back of an adventure tourer's bicycle is just a glorious idea. So we should actually mention that first came into contact with My Million to One through the Sean Conway talk that you organised, which for those who don't know, I mean, Sean Conway is a veteran adventurer, cyclist, and at the moment, the talk was about his upcoming swim from Land's End to John O'Groats, who's the first man that's ever done that. And at the last podcast I did with Ollie Broom, I looked up where Sean had reached. He was somewhere in the middle of the Bristol Channel, and I had a little look this morning because I knew I was going to be talking to you. And I see he's reached Northern Ireland, so it looks like he's more than halfway.
Apparently he's scheduled to arrive in Scotland tomorrow, if he's like lucky with everything. Yeah, he's doing fantastically. It
was such a lovely event, that, because it was really nice to go somewhere in central London where I didn't know anyone. I couldn't persuade anyone to go at short notice. I think I'd seen it on that day. And I walked into the room and you warmly greeted me and kind of pointed me at a table, and that was it. And then we were down there chatting away. I met up with Super Cycling Man, who guested on the podcast, and met up with lots of other wonderful people. It just had a really lovely feel.
It has. It's something that's really proving extra special about My Mini to One, just for me as well, getting to meet some really, really interesting people. And there is a warmth, because I think the kind of people that this project is attracting very early on are people who put themselves out there and take a risk and believe in something that they haven't heard of before. Sean was the very first event. So it was lovely. Lots of really interesting, incredibly inspirational people in their own rights, like Super Cycling Man, who's just crazy and does wonderful, wonderful things.
Yeah, he's hilarious. He made it. So he's done leg 2 from Turkey to Turkmenistan, and he's just got back. And I got a very nice tweet from him the other day. So I was hugely impressed that he'd done that journey. I have been worrying about him over August, but he's made it. So I can't wait to read about that.
Oh, he did brilliantly. I just following him on Facebook, and he took lots of pictures of his cape hanging up in hotel rooms. It was just, honestly, he's fantastic. But he's just such a lovely character as well. And what I think warm is the best way to describe it. There was a lot of warmth in the room and a lot of support and a lot of really interesting people.
So speaking of guests, I have to admit that on my podcast, I'm very grateful and very pleased with all the guests that I've got. But looking at your list, we've got Richard E. Grant. We've got Jason Fleming. You've got one of my favourite actors, David Westhead.
Oh, do you know David?
Well, I don't know him personally. I've known him from the TV, but you managed to persuade him to join and do a talk for you. I was really interested in your connections and how you found the whole process of signing people up to the cause, getting them to give their time.
David is a friend of mine. We worked together on Criminal Justice, the BBC's Criminal Justice, with Ben Whishaw years ago. I think it was 2007.
Yeah, I loved that show. Yeah, he was superb in it, wasn't he? That's a crooked lawyer.
And a wonderful drama to be on. The cast were just phenomenal. But that's how I first met David. And David is massively involved in Southern Africa. And I think the last I heard it, he was working a lot in South Africa. And actually, as I started speaking, I realised that I couldn't tell you. It's so hush-hush, but it's huge. He does phenomenal work out there. He spends far more time in Southern Africa than I do, and he does his own incredible charity work. He's just a lovely, lovely person. So I knew him. So I asked him, told him about My Mini to One, and asked him if he volunteered some time, and he was immediately just yes, straight away. Richard E. Grant, I've known, not through work, I've never worked with him, but he's supported other charitable bits and pieces that I've done out in Africa, and he's narrated 3 charitable documentaries that I made on my own, that I flew out and made, kind of in touch with him on and off for about 10 years. And he's incredibly supportive and straightforward and just absolutely lovely. And I told him I was doing this and asked him if he would volunteer an hour of his time to do a talk for actors to help them follow in his footsteps and give them confidence. And he immediately was just said yes. Same with Jason, who I worked with on Primeval. So a lot of these people are a lot of the actors are people that I've worked with. The way that I've kind of not networked, but been very lucky connecting with people is people like Leon Taylor, Olympic silver medalist diver, connected with him through LinkedIn. And it turns out that he's very good friends with Chris from Take a Challenge. And he was immediately very, very supportive. And I'm actually recording a podcast with him as well on Monday.
You don't know Lance Armstrong, do you? I keep trying to get him on the podcast, but it's
No.
elusive. In fact, Oprah got to him first. But one day, tell you, mark my words. as someone who's had a lovely long sabbatical earlier in the year, bucket lists are a wonderful thing. And I know that's something that you're supporting is very much at the heart of the concept. I was kind of curious about your bucket list in a way, because you're doing such an incredible thing with the charity and your daytime. I almost wonder if your bucket list is actually sitting on the sofa and having a cup of tea with your feet up.
God, my bucket. You know what? No one's ever asked me, and it hasn't even occurred to me that I have one. I'm so focused on trying to do it for everyone else. It hadn't even occurred to me.
Yeah.
There are things that I really want to do, and when this is complete, when the home is built and my 1,000,000 to 1 is over to some extent, so I'm still not sure exactly how it's going to wind down. I may very well continue the website. If the website gets a huge amount of use and the companies who advertise in it find it very useful, and the members still find it very useful, then I may very well continue it. Just without the events and opportunities, it will just become a site to help people with their bucket list. But there is a lot that I would like to do, but my main priority really is obviously the kids, and then it will just be finding my feet afterwards. But I think my 1,000,000 to 1 is changing me as a person so much, giving me a huge amount of confidence, but also making me realize that when I was working in television, I was very lucky to work on a lot of really interesting shows, and then I moved across into documentaries, but I never really found my niche. And I think that working on this has helped me realize that maybe I could kind of develop my own niche, or do something that's a bit more creative than what I was initially doing. So I think I'm finding my feet just as much as everyone else.
So I think it shows that if you believe in something strongly enough, even if you're starting it from scratch and it's a massive idea, that you can do it, and then you can inspire other people to pursue their goals.
Yeah, that's what I really, really want to do. What's funny is a lot of people have started sending me incredibly lovely, unbelievably lovely emails saying that I'm inspiring them. And I suppose I never really saw it that way. I don't think that I'm an inspiration. I think my 1,000,000 to 1 is an inspiration as an example of what can be achieved. But I think more than that, it's an example of how kind human beings can be and how much they can give, because this wouldn't be happening if every single person involved didn't take that leap of faith and join my 1,000,000 to 1 and see what it was about.
We should finish with giving some details of where people can look up more about the charity and hopefully start living out their bucket lists and donating their £1 plus to the cause. So there is the my1,000,000to1.com. You're there on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and then spreading your way across the web and the globe as the idea spreads. So a huge thank you, Alana, for giving up your time. I know you've got an incredible amount to do and you're very driven, so I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. And to our listeners, you know where to go. Give up your pound, sign up, and I hope to see you at one of the future events. Wow, what a great story. So to finish the show, I think it's best to hand over to friend of the show, singer-songwriter extraordinaire, Marcus Hillier, who is quite literally waiting for the hurricane.
And when no one is around, and you're still nowhere to be found, I feel myself coming down. This heavy heart has run aground. When the autumn came, you disappeared like fallen rain. When the snow is on the ground, and you're still nowhere to be found, you turn my whole world upside down. When you wandered out to hollow ground, when the autumn came, you disappeared people you know get lost in the snow. They will always travel with you wherever you go. Came, you disappeared like fallen rain, waiting for the hurricane.